We have a guest speaker this evening, and he is the manager of Freewater Coins in Provo, formerly Rust Coins. Rust Coin and Gift or whatever. And so, this is Heath Perkins right here. And he's gonna talk to us about, economics of coins through history. And, before he starts, are there any burning questions about the hobby, or is there anyone that has a need that we can reserve some time at the end, or let us know now, because we want to make sure you're taken care of. Any questions or needs? Okay. Heath, you're on.
Awesome. All right, so a little bit background. I got my degree in economics, and so for me, I have a little bit more of a focus on understanding the banking system and money and things that are involved with it, which just goes hand in hand with coins, because that's been how it's been for a very long time. But I got a question for you all. What is currency?
Currency is like coins get made and then they go into like circulation, and then people use them, and then they keep going.
Correct.
And then people keep buying them, and that's currency. And using them.
So currency is issued by either a country or a central bank. But in this scenario, currency, and this was from a professor, currency or money it's whatever the people accept as an exchangeable good. So if tomorrow everyone wants to accept oranges, well, that's currency. If the next day everyone wants to accept lettuce, then that's currency. So it's whatever we accept, society accepts. And so currency has a little bit different understanding in our current day, because currency has been devalued. Currency for the longest time used to have something that backed it. In our current situation globally, like, there is nothing really backing most currencies. And so I want to step into the question is, what is money? Because money and currency aren't the same thing.
Money is like, there's two forms of money. Paper and metal.
There we go. I like the answer. Let me stream out a little bit more on it. So paper is more like currency, and metal is more like money. So back in the day, our paper used to be backed by a metal, by real money. And so that's what I'm getting at with this. So money is something that doesn't devalue because it's based upon its weight. Money is, for lack of better terms, like for the last 4,000 or 5,000 years, gold and silver has been money. It's been accepted by the world for the last 4,000 to 5,000 years. It doesn't change. I was talking earlier, and I was mentioning, like, nations have kind of been discovered by eating their money. There's hordes of coins that are found that kind of develop a better understanding about certain civilizations or certain dynasties or things that existed. And so, but that money, even though it's in today and that nation's gone, that money's still money. That makes sense?
It
still has
intrinsic value.
Yes. So what I like to say is it has zero third-party risk. Money doesn't have third-party risk. And what does that mean? What does third-party risk mean?
Well, imagine if someone stole it, for example, it'd still be worth the same amount.
Kind
it was
of.
before.
Mm-hmm. So a third party can't do something that causes it to devalue. So for instance, let's take the US dollar. The more they print, the more it devalues. So there's third party risk. Because let's say we go to war and heaven forbid we become a territory of Russia. let's just say crazy scenario. Well, all of the US dollars are worthless because the nation's gone. But all of the gold and silver the US ever minted is still gold and silver. Doesn't matter if the nation's here or not, it's still money. So the difference between money and currency. And this is where the economics really comes down into why have we strayed from money?
Probably easier for governments to control what people use as things.
It's easier for them to control, plus they get to tax us in a way we don't understand they're taxing us. So inflation's a tax. No one wants to talk about it, but inflation's a tax. Because they get to print dollars and spend those dollars at full value, and then we see the inflation that happens consistently, and we get the leftovers, and we get to pay the tax at the end. So inflation's a true tax. And so part of the reason of going away from money is control. Trying to deplete the resources of society to rely more heavily upon the institutions that support the nation or not. So we've strayed from money because that gives you independence. And we've gone to currency because that makes you dependent. Does it make sense? So real quick, there's a little thing I like to say. So gold is the currency of kings and nations. Silver is the currency of the common man. And debt is the currency of slaves. So who has a $1 bill? All right. What does it say on the $1 bill? This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. So at the very top it says, if it's a green still, it says Federal Reserve note. What is the Federal Reserve?
Who prints it?
They print our money. But what are they?
It's just a group of guys that decide how much money gets printed.
Fair enough. Are they part of the government?
Yeah.
Nope.
Well, they're appointed.
No, it's separate, but ask Donald Trump, he'll say they're part of it. He's in charge.
Yeah.
He's not in charge. The Federal Reserve is a private bank that has the right to issue US dollars. And they took that right over and they issue us US dollars, and they issue us US dollars with interest. So the question is, do you own this dollar? Or do I own this dollar?
No.
True. So what am I in relation to this dollar?
Nothing.
The bearer,
Close.
I suppose.
Something along that line. I am the steward of this dollar. I have stewardship over the dollar. I don't have ownership. Does that make sense? Who owns this dollar?
The Federal Reserve.
The Federal Reserve. And they own this dollar plus interest to pay it back. So all the currency that we have, not money, but currency that we have, is not ours. We're just a steward over it. So this is going into the economics of things and understanding that this is not money. This is the currency of slaves. So that's what this does, because if the US goes away tomorrow, this is worthless. That's third party risk. Does that make sense, guys? Yes? So let's focus on a little question here, because has everyone seen gold going up in price? Who hasn't? Okay. Gold's been going crazy. Howdy.
How we doing?
Good. So why doesn't silver follow gold? Does anyone know this?
It seems to be more closely related to the economy, the stock market, what's the right thing to say? The inflation, what we pay for things and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit more, silver's a little bit more tied to manufacturing.
Sure.
More products that it's used in, that kind of, as component, or whatever.
Very true. So this is something I would like for you all to write down if you can, or remember. This is usdebtclock.org. This shows a lot of really good information, including why I'm going to show you why silver does not track gold, and why they are so detached from gold, or why they're so detached from the ratio they used to be in. So if you go down at the bottom of this page, you're going to see this little gold precious metals tab down here. You go ahead and click on that. You now have this. It tells you gold holdings by country, alleged, things like that. But the one thing that I'm interested in here is to figure out why does silver not follow gold, and it has to do with this down here. I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see that a little bit better. But if I scroll down, there's something that we're looking at right here. So, paper to silver ratio now. What does that mean?
Every silver dollar, there's 376 paper dollars.
Pretty much, yeah. For every, so there is one institution that gets to tell you what they got the market's right to create the futures for silver. So they were given by the government the right, and it's JP Morgan, the largest bank in the world, twice the size of the next bank in the world. But JP Morgan has the right because they control 26% of all the world's silver. So, and they get the right to print contracts on these, futures contracts, meaning they get to write paper off of their physical. So let's just do a little quick numbers for you. So if we only have 1,000 ounces in gold, and you times that by JP Morgan's 26%, there's only 260 out of the 1,000 ounces that exist in the world JP Morgan controls. Well, if they can write 375 contracts per each of those, and that's what they're currently doing, they're writing 97,500 contracts of paper when only 1,000 exist in reality. This is why silver doesn't track the same way gold does. Because if you look over here, gold is only manipulated by about 1/3 of what silver is manipulated by. Does that make sense? Any questions?
A few years ago, it seemed like that when the stock market went up, silver went down. When the stock market went down, silver went up. The last few years, silver has just followed the market. Market went up, silver went up, market goes down, silver goes down. It's been different than it was a few years ago. I'm still trying to figure out why that's happening.
There's more of a correlation when it comes to, it is traded like a stock. So it's very much like a stock. These futures contracts are very much like stocks. You don't physically own it, and you can't actually physically take possession of that futures contract you have. But if someone has the ability to write almost 100 times versus what's in reality, you have manipulation. So question I have for you guys is silver overvalued or undervalued?
Probably undervalued.
If you can manipulate it 375 times to 1, it's highly undervalued. Is gold overvalued or undervalued?
Probably overvalued as well.
Undervalued. Even though gold is at a high right now, it is still undervalued.
It's a gold, the government, our government has gold at $42.07 an ounce, right? And yet we're selling it on the open market at $3,400 an ounce. Okay? What happens if they suddenly reevaluate the gold to current prices?
It's a, if you will, accounting tactic of reappraising an asset class that hasn't been appraised since Nixon. Really, we're struggling with even doing an audit on Fort Knox to see if we even have the gold we claim we have.
Mm-hmm. There's
So
questions about that.
yeah, so lots of stuff to deal with, but to kind of give you an idea, again, gold and silver are money. Your paper dollars are not. They're currency. This is a debt note, gold and silver. are actually money, but they are manipulated. And we think they're expensive now, but if this market were ever to be revalued, meaning, let's say, you guys know what the BRICS nations are? Anyone heard this term?
Brazil, India.
Yeah,
South
Brazil,
Africa,
Russia,
China.
India, China and South Africa. So BRICS, that's how first letter of each of those. They've also added Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, United Arab Emirates, Iran, I mean, there's Ethiopia even. So there's been a few different nations that have joined them, and there's a line of about 60 more that want to join them. So if these BRICS nations, because the US right now dictates the markets. So if the BRICS nations say, hey, I want to really truly revalue what silver and gold is, and the US can't manipulate it anymore, we're not gonna have the prices we see them at right now. And the dollar is not gonna have the strength it has anymore because it has the ability to manipulate its prices down. And if that goes away and other nations want to revalue the precious metals market, we've lost it. We'll lose a significant amount of value in our dollar as soon as they want to revalue the markets. So this is part of my concern and part of helping you guys understand the difference between currency and money. Let me jump into this real quick. So we know why silver doesn't follow gold
Yeah.
as closely.
Yeah. What happens to money that we have in a savings account or a investment account? What will happen to that in that situation?
It'll lose its value, its purchasing power. So the purchasing power of all currencies which have third-party risk, and the reason it's losing value is not because the dollar, it's not because goods are getting more expensive, as the dollar is losing its value.
Yeah.
But it's a third party who's causing this.
Yeah. Right now, dollar has been the world currency for quite a while, and they're trying to take over the role of having their currency be the world currency instead of the dollar.
Well,
Okay.
what is the dollar, like, so, okay, another side tangent. Everyone knows we're kind of at war with Russia, right? Okay. Does everyone know that the US took $300 and something billion from Russia? We seized it.
Froze or Ukraine.
And we've.
You haven't redirected it, we
we've
just frozen it.
We're using it for the war in Iraq, or the war in Ukraine. So, if, let's say you had $300,000 in your account, and it was set aside for your family needs, and some outside entity comes and takes a third of it, are you friends anymore? Very easy to see why. But let's say that $300,000 you have, that 100 was specifically in one kind, like the dollar. Well, all the rest of the nations saw that as, why would I hold dollars? If America doesn't like what I'm doing, they're gonna take mine too. So no one wants to hold the dollar. They're all afraid of it. Because America, before this happened, like, we had never taken the SWIFT system and clawed back US dollars. Like, we've never done that before. Like, we've seized assets, but we haven't done what we did to Russia. And the rest of the world saw it. And they realized, okay, the dollar's now a weapon. If they don't like what we're doing, they're gonna take it from us. No one wants that to happen. So everyone's they're de-investing from the dollar. Divesting from the dollar. Even to the point where Saudi Arabia, one of our closest allies, has said, as their reserves they have for the nation, they are no longer holding dollars.
Thank you, I got you into that.
You're welcome. No problem. Make sense?
What are they?
Oh, real quick, guys. Bud, can you grab him?
He's got something for you, I think.
Yep. I'm gonna jump to something real
I
quick.
think he's got
More.
something for you, yeah. Like a pamphlet or something.
All right, I'm gonna jump to something so I can hand these out to you guys real quick. Okay. These are 90% silver quarters. So these silver quarters, back in 1964 was the last year they made them. In 1964, 5 of these were minimum wage. Today, that's worth $25. So minimum wage back in '64 is far better than minimum wage today. because of real money. So I'm gonna ask you guys something.
It's a great.
I'm gonna give you these, but you can't sell them, but you can trade them. Does that make sense? So you can't sell this, but if you're gonna, but you can trade it. But it's not, it's worth more than a quarter, it's worth about $5, okay? $5, $6. Ready? But this is what I want you guys to understand. This is a real savings right here, is precious metal. This one's for Dad.
That's a bit of a collector's, not me.
It's still for your dad.
All right.
Okay, thanks guys.
Yeah.
Thank
We'll
you
see
very
you guys
much.
next time. Where was that?
So, I guess a question about that is, if they're getting rid of their dollars, what are they hoarding precious metals instead? Is that what they're?
Yes, and that's.
Is it precious metals or is there another world currency that we?
Yeah.
They're trying to go to world currency, but this has been an ongoing thing for a long time.
Which currencies would be the biggest competitors against the dollar right now?
If the BRICS nations collectively created their own currency.
How about the euro, is that not one to worry about?
Euro doesn't have any strength. The West is dying and the East is rising. So who knows? Let me. Well, actually, it's in the presentation. Let's go back to that real quick.
So another question?
Any questions?
Yes. Me.
Oh, you. I got you.
So some, 18 years ago,
Mhm.
Greece had been in such debt that they confiscated people's savings accounts.
Cyprus. Yep.
And they did it to pay off the national debt. And so when people looked at their account, well, they couldn't go in to get anything. Or if they went in, they only got a small amount.
Mm-hmm.
Is that considered third-party risk, or what would you call it?
Third-party risk.
Third-party risk, is that third-party risk
Ye-
of paper, of currency?
Yes, because someone else is holding. So the third party is the bank.
Yeah.
The risk is the bank can confiscate your funds and legally do so. So that's where this question comes into. Who is the Bank of International Settlements? BIS.
Is it like the United Nations or something?
Have you ever heard of it? Who's heard of the Bank of International Settlements?
Never heard of it.
No one? This is the bank of all banks. So our Federal Reserve is a central bank. They bank with the World Bank and the IMF, but they have a central bank above them. The Federal Reserve has a central bank above them called the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements. The BIS teaches all the central banks across the world, and central banks are a bank that has the ability to print the nation's currency. So the BIS is the bank of all banks, and they dictate the rules to the world. So they're teaching central banks a few things. Back to this other thing. Under Basel III, gold will be treated as a tier 1 asset. So Basel III is a Bank of International Settlements decree that they started to put out. So they used to have a tier 1 asset is a riskless asset, meaning there's no risk involved whatsoever if you hold this. This is what you want to hold. So the Bank of International Settlements will teach central banks what they should and should not hold, and they will dictate it from the top. Well, it used to be U.S. Treasuries and U.S. bonds until 2023, when they recategorized the tier 1 asset to gold. So since the beginning of 2023, central banks have been told from the top, the Bank of International Settlements, what assets they should be investing in, and it's gold. No one's trusting currency anymore, they're trusting real money again. So we're going back to a system that is going to try to be backed by gold.
And that was all because of that.
The Bank of International Settlements.
Well, when the U.S. took that money from Russia, is that kind of an instant?
Yeah, that could help trigger it, but this was coming for a while. The rest of the world doesn't see the U.S. able to fulfill its debts and obligations. Every 90 days we have $1 trillion in interest. Let me help you guys comprehend a trillion. This is a crazy number that no one truly gets. Every 11 days you'll live 1 million seconds. Every 35 years, you'll live 1 billion seconds. And every 35,000 years, you'll live 1 trillion seconds. That's how different 1 million is from 1 billion and 1 billion is from 1 trillion. Like, these numbers are unfathomable, and every 90 days we have an interest payment of $1 trillion added to our debt. That's just interest, that's nothing more than interest. That's not the debt itself, that's just the interest payments. So the rest of the world's looking at America and saying, hey, yeah, they're the reserve currency, they're the ones who can print for the rest of the world, but they've overstretched themselves.
They're not good.
They have too much debt. So that's where we're kind of at, but this is why the Bank of International Settlements has reclassified Tier 1 or riskless assets as gold. And that's why all these central banks are doing this huge gold rush. They've been buying gold since 2023 as fast as they've ever done before in history. And so that's, but why aren't we seeing the true value of gold rise? Well, we have that manipulation that I showed you in that one slide. Gold should be a lot higher than it is, but because I have a 131 paper ounces for every 1 physical ounce, the physical's never going to sway the paper market. So when they say spot price, that's for a paper contract in a futures. Does that make sense? Am I losing everyone? Not quite. So a lot of fun, crazy terms, but the Bank of International Settlements is the group that we need to understand dictates the rules.
Are they trying to slowly whittle that down closer over time, or is it probably never going to happen?
Our debt?
The paper to physical.
They're going to exploit it until the end. There's no point to letting it go and losing all the potential money that you can make off of it. So they're going to keep doing it. But the BIS also was in charge of what he was talking about, the confiscation of money in banks in Cyprus. That was the first experiment that they were working on of what's referred to, you guys remember the bailouts? You ever heard that term, bailouts? So the government bailed out all of these banks. This was in 2008. So some of you may be quite a bit younger, but in 2008, we had a financial collapse. We saw all sorts of stuff, but we had the US government and the Federal Reserve bail out insane amounts of money. Those were bailouts. They know they can't do that again because the citizens would revolt. But what they can do, and what they're teaching, what the BIS is teaching central banks and then teach their member banks, is what's referred to as a bail-in. A bail-in was used in Cyprus, meaning a bank can take deposits and issue failing shares of their bank in its stead. Does that make sense? So this is the next step that you're going to see. If we start to see a financial collapse again, you're not going to see a bail-in or bail-out. You're going to see bail-ins. You're going to see people's assets and deposits they put in with the banks seized to make sure the bank is still liquid.
So what that means is, I don't like to keep a lot of money in my bank account.
Why?
Because if it's actually owned by the bank, it's just a note, they owe me,
Well,
or whatever.
you gave up your stewardship to the bank.
Yeah, anyway, if they take it, then I got nothing,
And
or a fraction,
yeah, and it's third-party risk.
third-party risk. So
Cash is third-party risk.
that's why I've invested more and more, and I saw that. If they did it in Greece or whatever, or Cyprus, they could do it here.
They can. And they're being taught by this bank, the Bank of International Settlements, to do this elsewhere. So
Is a government bond as big a risk as just leaving it sitting in the bank, or they both?
bonds, again, give third-party risk because if the US defaults on its debt, the bonds are worthless.
Yeah.
So if we default on our debt and we don't have the reserve currency abilities to print like we do currently, there's no fulfillment of that debt. But holding that debt gives you gives the largest holder of that debt first priority over assets the government holds. So this is like bankruptcy court. So if the US declares bankruptcy because they can't fill their debts and obligations, well, whoever holds the most debt, which is the Federal Reserve right now, they get the majority of the assets. What are some of the assets the United States government owns?
Fort Knox,
Well, if it's there.
if it's still there, yeah.
Low land.
So BLM, National Parks. In 2008, they bought Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. What does that mean?
They control the mortgage industry too.
90% of all the mortgages in the US is owned by the United States government. It was never given to us, even though we used our tax dollars to buy Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They should have given all the mortgages to the citizens. They didn't. They're holding that as an asset. If the US declares bankruptcy because they can't fulfill its debts and obligations, everyone who has a mortgage on a house, that gets to go to whoever holds all the debt. And if the Federal Reserve holds the debt, they now own the title of the mortgage on the house. So we are in a really weird position right now because there's way too many assets that people don't realize the government holds that are now, could be part of that divvying up to the largest debtors. And so if you're holding a bond, you're probably on the very, very low end of percentages of the outstanding bonds that are out there. You might not get anything, but the top guys are gonna get the majority of the assets. That's how bankruptcy works. And we have to revalue something because we are heading towards this. We can't afford our debts.
So another thing about bonds
Mhm.
is, am I right in thinking that China for a long time bought a lot of US bonds?
Yeah.
And so if gold and silver goes up, bonds will drop.
Yeah, because
And
generally that's the case.
And the Chinese don't want, because they have a lot of bonds, they don't want gold and silver to go up radically.
But they're the
because-
largest purchaser of gold in the world right now.
I know, I think they're trying to redistribute, they have assets in US bonds and now they're switching to gold.
They're buying gold everywhere.
And at some point, the manipulation of gold might quit.
It has to give. So who or what is buying gold or silver? So this is central banks. The groups that get to print money for nations is now purchasing real physical assets. In 2018, we were supposed to see a housing collapse. Every economist that I was following, everyone is like, yeah, we're gonna see a housing collapse, like, we're in trouble. Well, the Federal Reserve stepped up and said, hey, let's pretend you're Bank of America. I'm the Federal Reserve. What I did is I said, hey, Bank of America, show me all your bad mortgages. I'm gonna buy them from you. I'm gonna digitize out of thin air a number. I'm gonna put it in the account you have with me, so your Bank of America Federal Reserve account. And I'm gonna buy real assets off of you for a digitized number out of thin air. So they're already taking real assets off the table. So this was the repo back in 2018. In October they started it. They started doing the repossession. We haven't seen foreclosures on houses since what, 2011, 2012? Like they're almost dried up and there's nothing out there. Housing is supposed to be revalued based upon foreclosures, people who can't afford homes that get repoed, but instead the Federal Reserve, who prints the money out of thin air, is now buying it up. And I'm not gonna pay you top dollar for your assets that aren't paying you. So if you got someone who can't pay their mortgage, I'm not gonna give you the full value of that mortgage. I'm gonna buy it from you for maybe 40 cents on the dollar. So I'm gonna get a huge discount on top of digitizing the money out of thin air and giving it to you in your account. So it's crazy.
That is pretty crazy.
Well, they get real assets. This is how messed up the system is. It's like they're getting real assets. The market isn't revaluing where it should be with the housing. That's why we have seen a steady increase. Yeah, constantly going up because there's nothing to revalue it against. There's no foreclosure or bank repo or any of these things. And so this is the struggle we have. The same group that can digitize numbers and buy real assets at the Fed, they're buying gold and silver. They're offloading from their books certain assets and loading up in gold and silver. Like, this is a move to something real. They all know the currency game has kind of played itself out, and they need to do something different. That's why they're all going this direction. And so your big players are buying gold and silver, real money. They're just divesting from currency and investing into money. This has taken a bit of time. Let's see, I told them the minimum wage comparison. So 1964, 5 of those quarters, which I'd buy today for about $25, is what minimum wage was. If you don't want to share, you don't have to. What wage are you at?
A lot higher than that.
You're higher than 25.
Yeah.
You're not part of the norm. Awesome. I like that. Are you over 25? Are you making over 25 an hour? On every hour? Yeah. No. I'm barely. Like, this is not an easy thing to swallow that $25 is the equivalent to minimum wage back in 1964. But, what's that?
That's when I graduated from high school.
Yeah, so when you graduated, your quarter could buy you a gallon of gas.
Yep.
And some.
A nickel to buy a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
I worked for I worked for 85 cents an hour at a grocery store.
There you go. So, but that was when real money was real money.
That's when it was real money.
And we've gone away from that. What can a quarter buy you today?
Won't even buy a candy bar.
No. What can a quarter buy you, bud? If you had a quarter in your pocket, what could you go buy?
Denali probably.
Physically nothing. A bouncy ball.
At some places.
A gumball, a bouncy ball maybe. A ring that turns your finger green. Like, that's all you can buy with our quarters today, because it's not real money. I mean, the value of the metal in it, it's actually kind of coming up. It's worth a little bit more than it was, but it's still not worth the 25 cents. But minimum wage back then was $25 equivalent today. And so I'm going to go into another question. There's a guy who coined the term silent depression. Does anyone know what depression is? What is a depression, economically speaking?
When the country's essentially losing value, I guess you could say, like there's less stuff being produced than there was before.
Yeah. So gross domestic product is significantly dropped. We're not as productive as we were, we're not exporting, we're not purchasing, all of the things that make up gross domestic product, which is consumer spending, investment, government spending, and then net import and exports.
Would you say like the velocity of money has slowed down, that money is not circulating as much, people are out of work, they don't have any money to spend?
So the Great Depression causes that, causes a cycle where money slows down. So velocity is a part of it. But in a Great Depression, there was a guy who coined this term, the silent depression. There was a guy who took the worst year of the Great Depression, and you guys have all heard of the Great Depression, right? Horrible time. No, maybe. Great Depression, okay. So 25% unemployment. So 1 out of 4 people didn't have a job. So really tough time. Well, I shouldn't say 1 out of 4 people. 1 out of 4 people who were of working age did not have a job. But they took the worst year, 1930, and they compared it to last year, 2024. And they showed, so here's some statistical statements. What is the average of something? You guys understand average? Take everything, you divide it by the amount that you have, however many numbers you added up. What is the median? What does median mean?
Number that's halfway on the top and the bottom.
Halfway from the top and the bottom. So the average can take the top and the bottom in effect, and that can skew the average. But the median means 50% is above and 50% is below, and I'm right here, the median. So the very median of all wages in 1930, the worst time of the Great Depression, was equivalent to $85,000 today. The median wage today is $55,000. So we are earning $30,000 less in the median wage than the worst time in the Great Depression. And what they did is they took what the median was, and they took what a house would cost, and they divided that by the wage, that median wage, and it took about 3 years for that wage to pay a house off. Does that make sense?
In the Great Depression.
In the Great Depression. So that $85,000 equivalent today, it took 3 years. If you just took $85,000 3 years in a row, the house would be paid off. Today, with that $55,000, the average house price would take over 10 and a half years to pay off. So not only do we make less, but everything that we have is far more expensive than even in the worst time of the Great Depression. So this guy coined this term, this silent depression. We are at a point where we truly are worse off than in the Great Depression. How many people, what's the new term? Who has a side hustle? Side hustle. I'm sure you got a few side hustles. Side hustles.
Any way you can make some extra money. Yeah.
Why?
Offset the efficiency you're experiencing. Keep up with everything.
Offset the loss of your purchasing power.
Yeah.
We are worse off than the Great Depression. We have more opportunity because of the internet, because of society, how it's built right now. The ability to do side gigs and be able to travel farther because of our mode of transportation as well. We have far more resources at our disposal now to have a second job or a side gig, or whatever you want to call it, and sometimes 2 or 3. Well, this is part of this whole terminology, the silent depression we're in. And this is why I like to educate individuals about stepping away from currency, getting into money, and realizing that's a true savings account. But if you don't hold it, you don't own it. So if you don't hold it, there's third-party risk. Like if the bank's holding your cash, there's third-party risk, because if it decides to shut its doors because it's not solvent, and it needs to take some of your money to become solvent, that's third-party risk. So you need to hold what is yours so that you eliminate the third-party risk. Yes, there's risk of theft, but at the same time, like when you're holding things that are precious, you just keep your mouth shut. That's the whole point of it. We don't need people to know what we have. But we are in a silent depression. No one wants to talk about it. The numbers have shown it over and over and over. And you can understand why central banks are buying gold. You can understand why the Federal Reserve is buying mortgages and homes, real assets. They're divesting from dollars. They don't care to hold dollars. There's no point to hold dollars. It's not a asset class any longer.
It's the end game then, I guess, is the dollars crashes. Would there be a new currency that was created tied to the real assets then, like gold and silver? And
So, do you guys think we're going to a digital currency? Yes, back there.
They want to.
They want to go to a digital
Imperial
currency.
credits.
Imperial credit, there we go. Except for imperial credits some of them were actually gold. So, they want to go to a digital currency. Why?
Super control.
Easier to control.
Super easy.
Same response as the first question I asked you. It's easier to control you. This is all digital. I can now use AI involved with digital and say, hey, guess what? I don't want you to be 15 miles outside of your home location. So any transaction you try to make outside of that, it will deny it. Or I don't like that you're eating meat, so I'm only gonna let you have 2 hamburgers this month. If you try to buy a third, they can deny it. This is the power of digital currency. Digital junk. But what's the competition to digital currency?
Bitcoin.
It is a digital currency.
It is a
Oh, okay.
What's the competition to digital currency?
Would have to be gold, I guess, or physical gold.
Real money. Why do you think they're buying up real money?
They know all that other stuff's gonna crash and burn at some point.
you eliminate your competition. If real money
There isn't any.
is your competition,
And they have it all.
and you're buying it up and telling everyone, oh, I'm backing my digital currency with this gold and silver so you can trust it. Well, great. But all you're doing is taking real money out of the market. Like significantly taking real money out of the market. Why do you think we're hitting new highs in gold? Because they know that people will eventually start to sell off. So you don't sell off if it's low. You sell off when you start to see new highs. So people are selling off. I mean, I have a unique perspective because I get to do a lot of the purchasing for the shop. So when we're excessively heavy in something, I go to my wholesalers to sell off. Or if I need something, I go to my wholesalers to pick it up. But there was a point there where does everyone know what a gold Kruger end is? Okay, so it's a South African gold piece. They started doing it back in the 60s even, and when it was illegal to own gold in the U.S. It was illegal to own gold. This is how crappy our country's been for a bit. But illegal to own gold, but South Africa produced a 1 ounce Troy gold piece. Does anyone know what the gold eagles are? U.S. gold eagles. So it's the equivalent of that South African, but produced here in the U.S. The U.S. has significantly higher cost than the South African. Normally I'm selling the U.S. for about 125 over the spot price, and I'm selling a Kruger for about $50 over spot price. But when I go to sell, I'm also selling my Kruger for less than I am my Eagle. But recently, the wholesalers got so heavy in U.S. gold Eagles, they were buying my Eagles for the same price as my Kruger. And then within about a 2-week period, every wholesaler that I was working with, they were paying the highest they've ever paid me before on gold Eagles. So what does that tell us?
I'm not sure.
Dollars going way down.
People have realized the value of gold.
Okay. A huge institutional purchase of gold picked up from these private wholesalers just depleted them of their entire stock. Someone came into some institutions came to all the wholesalers and liquidated every one of their gold Eagles because they had none. Like they were literally like paying me twice what they normally would pay me. Not twice as like the value, but percentages. They were paying me far more than they've ever paid me before. So our transactions with the wholesaler are those public information. We don't know who picked it up, but we know that the U.S. had a lot of people sell off. That's why all these wholesalers got heavy on it. They were paying less and less and less for it, and then all of a sudden they started paying higher than they've ever paid before. Meaning, someone just picked it all up.
So I think the gold's gonna be worth a lot more than.
Well, the gold is worth a lot more, and you know because of those ratios, it's worth a lot more. That's why all these nations are buying it now, because it's still undervalued. As is silver. Silver is more cumbersome because it weighs more, with the same amount of value. It's like 100 ounces of silver is equivalent to 1 ounce of gold. I mean, that's a lot of extra weight compared to this. So a lot of nations, there are a few nations doing silver, more stepping into it, but they're all doing gold. But this is what we need to understand, like, they're trying to push us into a digital currency, and the only competition to their digital currency is gonna be real money. And that real money is constantly being sold by the citizens because we're seeing new highs. And so, kind of a cynical perspective, how do I get this real money out of the hands of citizens? I just let the market hit new highs and new highs and new highs. I just let it climb and have everyone talk about it, write all these reports about it. Because everyone wants to sell off now because it's the high. So everyone's selling off. Well, and they keep buying it up. Why? Because it keeps getting it out of the hands of the citizens. Because again, it's the only competition to their digital currency that's coming. Does this make sense, guys?
It does. If you want to be extra cynical, they can send some guys to take what physical gold you have too.
Well, the U.S. has enough weapons to arm the whole world in a sense. So their struggle is they know they can't go that route. There's easier ways of doing it.
So if we're taking currency out of our bank account and investing in gold or silver, is one better than the other? You know, silver is probably easier to spend, if you will, than gold is,
Mhm.
if you need to, but would you put money in gold or silver, or does it matter?
There's a few variables. Portability, gold wins.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. Portability's there. But how many? Let me ask you this question. All right, we got in the back. How often do you make a $3,000 purchase in a year?
In a year,
How many times do you make a $3,000 purchase or more?
probably 12, 13 times.
12 or 13 times. Okay. How often do you make a $20 purchase or a $30 purchase?
Hundreds.
Hundreds. So what is more valuable to him? It's the $20 and $30 versus the $3,000, because he's going to do it 100 times more than he
It's
is.
a lot easier to spend silver than it is to spend gold.
Well, our spending habits are around silver.
Yeah.
Like how much silver is $30. We spend $30 consistently all the time.
Yeah.
That's a normal everyday thing. But how often do we make a $3,000 purchase?
Tax time.
Well, tax.
Property tax.
Yeah, I got a lot of people coming in selling gold to
That's
pay
my
off the taxes.
$1 grand is my property tax.
Ah, that's horrible. But that's reality. But this is what I'm getting at. Like, silver is by far a more valuable asset because it takes care of the day-to-day purchase that we all know we're gonna have. We have more day-to-day purchases than we do $3,000 purchases. If you're into gold and you have a decent amount of money, gold is great because the spread between gold. So let's say I buy gold, there's about $100 to $120 spread on gold. So where I sell it at and where I buy it at. So you have $120 you're gonna lose if you bought it today and sold it today. Silver, if you bought 100 ounces, there's $4 that there's the spread generally on silver. So if you bought 100 ounces, and you bought 100 ounces and sold 100 ounces, you're gonna lose $400 versus about 125. So gold is better in the sense that you can maintain more of your money if you need to sell it right away. But if you're holding precious metals for more than 2 years, they're both great routes, but silver has more use for the common people. Make sense?
Which is why they put silver in those coins instead of gold.
Well, yeah, but silver used to be a ratio of 16 to 1. So it took 20 Morgan dollars, but silver weighs less than gold does because of its density. Those 20 Morgan dollars bought one US $20 gold piece. Well, that US gold piece is just shy of 0.97 of a troy ounce. Well, those Morgans are only 0.77 each of a troy ounce. So it took about 16 real ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold. Today we're at 100 to 1.
Right.
Because of the manipulation that you saw in those numbers. So gold and silver have completely stretched too far apart. And for silver to double, the likelihood is far more than for gold to double from this paper. So for gold to go to $6,000 or $6,600, silver going to $65, more likely. So silver has good potential because of the manipulation involved, but it's usability. We can all use silver. On top of that, silver is a natural antibiotic. You can actually throw it in water. It will clean water for you. It has you literally can have kids suck on silver and it'll get rid of bacterial and sore throats and stuff like that. I mean, raised on a silver spoon, everyone heard that term? Raised on a silver spoon was back during the Black Plague, they'd have their kids suck on a silver spoon because it would kill all the crap in their throat and they wouldn't get sick. Silver has far more benefits than gold does outside of just storing value. But all this aside, I want you guys to understand the difference between currency and money. Money does not ever have third-party risk. Make sense? And you raise your hand, but any Christians in here? Okay, got a few Christians maybe? All right. I'm going to go to a Bible verse. I read this to him earlier. So let's jump into a Bible verse. Anyone ever heard of Haggai?
Yeah.
Third to last book in the Old Testament. So Haggai. So Old Testament Haggai. It's chapter 2, because there's only 2 chapters in the whole book, which is great. Haggai 2, 6 through 9. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, so you know God speaking here. Yet once it is a little while, I will shake the heavens and the earth and the sea and the dry land, and I will shake all nations, and the desire of all nations shall come. And I will fill this house with glory, saith the Lord of hosts. The silver is mine, and the gold is mine, saith the Lord of hosts. The glory of this latter house shall be greater than the former, saith the Lord of hosts. And in this place will I give peace, saith the Lord of hosts. So, God's currency is gold and silver. Why?
It comes from the earth.
Natural. Okay. Agency.
Ah.
If you hold it, you own it. No third-party risk. It's yours. You can do whatever you need with it. There's no control when you have gold or silver. Let's look at the opposite spectrum, digital currency. The very opposite of what God's currency is. I'm just going to throw it out there. This is the devil's currency. Let's go as far as that. Full control. To the point they can even seize it, take it, deny you it.
So you can use it on. That's pretty crazy.
So no agency versus full agency. Like, this is the reality of money and currency. They are two different systems, one based upon reality and one based upon